Today's episode is brought to you by the Vegas Beer Guys and the Sounds in Cinema podcast.
Everything sequel contains explicit language. And why the fudge not, you melon farmer?
Hello and welcome to the Everything Sequel podcast. This is the Rescuers Down Under episode, part of the 1990 single sequels, yet again. Michael Shantz here from the How Dare You Awards. Joining me, the man down under, Tom Stewart himself. Say hello to everybody, Tom.
Oh no, not the Rangers. What'll I do? What'll I do? Don't let your ma call the Rangers, please. My poor baby boy got eaten by the crocodiles. Boo-hoo-hoo.
McLeach is a good fucking villain.
Well, we're back in the period of Disney where not only are they gleefully putting children in danger, they have characters standing around actively mocking them while they're doing it.
Real dick move.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm trying to think of the equivalent of this scene in an adult live action movie, and it's probably that scene in Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, right.
She's at the dinner table and they're all mocking her crying. Like it's that level of
malevolence,
rubbing salt in the wound.
Right. Well, I think it's interesting because obviously, well, again, maybe not to you and me, but it should have been so long ago. This is a 1990 movie.
Well, at least for this one, it feels like I understand why I didn't think this was a single sequel.
Yeah, absolutely.
But now I realize...
And there were plans for a third one, I learned. But
well, also, and we'll get into this, but
yeah,
this is a unique historical moment because this is the first time that Disney thought of sequelizing one of their animated features. And from this point onwards, that trend has just exploded.
Mm-hmm.
The swathe of video sequels.
Right, Aladdin's.
The Aladdins, the Lion Kings.
And that was the plan for Toy Story, but they made the movies too damn good.
Right, exactly. And now we're on the other side of that, where it's strange if a Disney feature doesn't get a sequel. But this was the first time they that it crossed their mind to do this with one of their animated films.
Well, and I also think it's interesting because this is sort of what's known as the second surge or whatever of Disney, the second golden time from like 89 to 99 kind of a thing.
Starting with The Little Mermaid, presumably.
But started with The Little Mermaid, which I think was the year before, right?
It was, yeah.
And this one seems retro compared to the new, say, Little Mermaid. And yeah, exactly. And Aladdin and Lion King and Beauty and the Beast and so on.
Yeah, well,
so this movie sits in a strange place.
It does. Well, added to the fact that the original Rescuers is 1974, which means
I thought it was 77.
Oh, it was 77. I'm thinking of Chinatown, but it's the same thing. Like that, it's another sort of mid-70s property that's been revived in 1990.
Yeah.
Along with the two Jakes. The other first hit, I mean, this is a sequel, but there's a lot of firsts attached to it. This is the first use of the Disney computer animation system.
This is the first fully
entire film.
And it's for the entire movie.
Because they've done sequences before.
Yeah, that was an interesting factoid for this movie. Because I didn't know that.
The Great Mouse Detective had at least one sequence that was computer generated. The clock mechanisms were computer generated, and that was, I think, 86.
Yeah, it feels like the night in Young Sherlock Holmes, except it's for the whole movie.
Yeah, and they're both Sherlock Holmes films. So it's within a couple of years of it, or maybe even in the same year, I don't know. There were two computer generated firsts in two Sherlock Holmes movies. Yeah, so this movie, like you say, it lives in its own moment for a number of different reasons, both on and off screen.
But I can see precursors to other things in this movie while you watch it, which is interesting. Even in the opening credits, I see bugs walking on leaves, and it reminds me of ants on sticks in The Lion King.
Or even A Bug's Life.
Yeah, right.
Wow. This was back when Pixar was a machine they used, not a corporate machine that ran
not a corporate machine that ran the entire company.
Pixar is like a Star Trek computer. Like it sort of takes over. It's sort of taken over the taken over the unit.
It's the HAL 9000 of Disney.
And then speaking to the moment that this film was made, I think that's part of the darkness of it. With that everything that's in
the storyline, you mean?
The style of it. So I think there's two reasons why this movie is darker than you might expect a Disney movie to be. One of them is historical. Like Disney animated features and horror movies have the same source material, which is European folk tales and Gothic literature. So ontologically, they're often indistinguishable from each other. And there's a couple of moments in this film where I would struggle to imagine how the live-action horror version of this would be any different.
Even when the movie's trying to be fun.
Yeah, especially. I'd say especially when it's trying to be fun.
Yeah. This kid is being awfully cavalier with that fucking golden eagle.
But the other part of it is contemporary. In the 1980s, I think Disney was pervaded with a dark imagination. I mean, we've already mentioned The Great Mouse Detective, which came out a few years before, which is such a horror film. Vincent Price is in it.
Right, yes.
I mean, you want a clear signal that you're in a horror movie? You got Vincent Price there.
You put Vincent Price there.
But, even in their live-action output with Return to Oz...
Even Michael Jackson knew that.
He did. One of his few validated decisions throughout history. And in the live action output, Return to Oz. I mean, this is a few years ago, but I think this is the culmination of those kinds of movies becoming the Disney brand for a while. And then I suppose, as you were saying, this is also a watershed moment because the movies that they did in the 90s kind of walks away from
it's interesting
the
that
horror side of these films.
Right. It's interesting
now
that this movie starts 1 year after those movies begin, starting with The Little Mermaid.
Yes. Yeah.
There's an overlap.
Yeah, it's there is. I mean, I'm always surprised to see that The Little Mermaid isn't. I think of it as a 90s movie.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But it's before this. This seems like I don't know. Like I don't know what, because these movies are coming out thick and fast. Like I don't know how conscious this is, but this might just be the trying to wrap up the past era with a nice little bow.
Well,
before we move on to new pastures.
I think that's how it feels, but only in retrospect, because
Sure.
I know that they planned on having a third Rescuers, and the fact that...
And I'm amazed that this doesn't exist, at least in video form.
Yeah, exactly. But what's interesting, at least to me, was that I read that the powers that be at Disney, they didn't even want to complete this film when they were seeing what it was. And they thought, well, we're more than halfway done. We'll release it and we'll be done with it. And it,
Talk about hubris. I mean...
Yeah.
This film looks gorgeous.
It is really beautiful. But
yeah.
The thing is that it didn't do what Disney movies were doing, starting with The Little Mermaid. On a budget of $30 million, it made $3.4 on its opening weekend. And in the USA and the world, $27.9 million. So they cut bait after this movie came out. And...
Well, they didn't stop making sequels, though. That's the fascinating
Beauty and the
part.
Beast was what...
Yeah, sorry. Well,
No, go ahead.
You'd think, I don't know. you think because of what happened with Disney sequels after this, that this was a rip-roaring success.
Yeah, exactly. I know.
Because pretty much Disney put all their chips in the sequel box from now on.
Yeah.
Until this very day. So what lesson did they learn from this movie? You know what I mean? Like.
No, yeah, I know exactly what you mean, but I'm trying to think of it doesn't it lacks coherence. It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
Their mindset for this movie or this series, and then what they ended up doing with all the other movies. Yeah. They're diametrically opposed. It's crazy.
I mean, maybe it is just the video distinction. Maybe that's how you reconcile the two thought processes. Maybe it is like, look, we can make cheap sequels that will go straight to video, but let's not do a theatrical release sequel until we're confident that this is gonna work for us financially. I mean, if you could, I don't know. I
don't have other budgets in front of me.
The kids, then
right.
You could come up with The Rescuers in, I don't know, Abu Dhabi,
Germany.
Or whatever would be nice.
Yeah. But I have to say that I was surprised that an animated movie in 1990 that doesn't have the new kind of glossy sheen of what they started to do with the other movies cost $30 million. That surprised me.
Yeah. Well,
but
I think that
since we know it was also the first fully not fully animated, but the first fully digital.
Yeah, but it's
that's got to be where the expense comes from, right?
That's got to be. Yeah, I think that's where the expense comes from. But my feeling is that they're in experimenting with what they want to do with this. Mm-hmm. They actually find something that a really unique look that we've never really seen again in Disney film, and I just kind of revel in it.
Well, I think that's what's interesting about the movie is that the movie, it feels like both to me. It gives me the warm and fuzzies of the animation that I kind of grew up on as a young kid.
Yeah.
In the 80s and the 70s, but it also has looks that are akin to, like I said, Lion King and Beauty and the Beast, and it really is an in-between kind of movie, and in that way, its animation is very interesting and compelling to watch to me.
And it's very attractive now, looking at it retrospectively, because, that being able to have a movie that looks recognizably computer animated, but still has that sort of hand-drawn feeling that we associate with older Disney movies, to have both of that in the same movie is quite a coup, looking back.
Yeah, it is.
And again, I mean, we've talked about this to death with the Terminator 2's intermixing of practical and digital effects, and I think something similar is going on here, where
I think you're right.
They understand how to make films in the old style, and they're experimenting with this new style, and the fusion of the two leads to really attractive filmmaking.
Yeah.
I that's what I felt throughout this movie. I was sort of a little bit taken aback, and credit to this movie, like, I read about the computer animated part of the story after I'd watched about 20 minutes of it, because I saw something that just seemed so computer animated I had to check.
Yeah.
But up to that point, I was like, I don't know what is bringing about this effect, but it's cinematically very interesting.
I agree, and going into this movie, did you have a background kind of sense of the overall opinion of the movie? Because I think because of
when I started to read about it, I did.
Yeah, I mean, I always had this sense that this was a failed movie, and that it wasn't supposed to be very good. That was my kind of.
It's another one of my.
I had no evidence to back that up, but that was sort of the sense that I had of this movie.
Well, you're correct,
and I think it's so far removed from that.
No, I mean the experience of
it
watching
was such a genuine, lovely surprise to watch this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. But however you knew it, you were right, because as soon as I read, like, every article I read about this began with, otherwise a disappointment. This was the first use of the computer animated,
Yeah, right.
And I'm like,
so
really?
that was my sense.
You're gonna write off the content of the movie as well, because I don't think you should do that either.
This movie has everything that I think that a movie like it would have had and should have had at the time. I mean, it's so of the time too, Tom. I mean, I couldn't help but think about Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home with the message about the whales and conservation.
Yeah.
All of that's here in this movie. So,
well,
time and time again, we see that movies around the same time are speaking to each other in some way.
Oh, and I have some instances in this movie where it feels like we're watching every other 1990 single sequel.
Yeah, right.
Including the other one made by Disney that we watched.
But I also want to say that, like you said, it seemed like every review would say, other than this new animation, it's utterly underwhelming. But this movie has 71% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Okay.
So,
well,
what the fuck?
Okay. Well, I was obviously reading the wrong articles, because I'm really happy to hear that.
But as always, we have to ask ourselves, is that revisionist?
Yeah, sure. I don't care how it came about. I'm really happy to see it. I'm really happy. Normally, when I hear the Rotten Tomatoes score, it's as apparently is now a formula for our show, as you expressed in one of the previous episodes. I'll go, oh, that was mean, or that's a low blow. So I'm pleasantly surprised to see that the collective estimation of this movie is more than even I give it.
Is higher than I thought. Yeah,
and I feel like I'm one of the cheerleaders for this film.
Well, we haven't mentioned the directors. We got Hendel Butoy and Mike Gabriel. Not a lot of work as far as other directing. It said that Hendel Butoy, he directed the 1999 version of Fantasia, but not all of it, just a segment.
Well, okay, so... But then that would have been the only new segment in the movie, though, right?
See, and I couldn't remember...
So it's
that
the
movie if it
original
had
plus...
new segments, or do they mean he's like cleaning up?
No, I think
the animation.
There are there's at least one new segment in there.
Okay.
Plus, minus a little bit of the racism.
Well, I hope so.
So it's like
the other guy, Mike Gabriel. He did direct Pocahontas.
Okay.
He also got nominated for an animated short called Lorenzo.
Ah. Excellent.
So, but again, like two people that apparently didn't at least have a lot of directing experience for animated features.
What a challenge for them to be making a film with this entirely new process of animation.
Right? Yeah. Maybe they were the go-to guys for that particular new invention.
The only guys who knew how to reboot Pixar after it shut down. It was like, no, you gotta tap it 3 times in succession. That's the only way it'll turn back on.
Yeah. The Pixar Whopper is different than the regular Whopper.
It's interesting. It's so funny because normally I look up the directors, but because this is an animated movie, I didn't. And it reminds me that this is the first time we've done an animated movie, and how prejudiced that is of me, because I pretty much like 20%.
You son of a bitch.
I know, about 60% of my notes are, wow, the direction is amazing. Mm-hmm. If you did this in live action, you'd be winning Oscars left, right, and center.
Yeah, right.
So
it also... Go ahead. Yes, by all means, go on with that. No.
You'll presumably take over that mantle for the rest of the podcast, as is your want.
As this movie opened, I was reminded that there's a certain swath of animated shorts, cartoons, features that, without kind of hitting you over the head, manage to teach you things too. Because we open like hearing the didgeridoo. And I just remember thinking how cool that is, that it's not really focused on or anything, but it's there.
Yeah.
And if you're a curious kid, you end up learning things about geography, about climate, about whatever. And in this movie, you know, you get some Australia shit. My note is we get some Australia shit.
I have a very similar note. Like the one shot across the flower fields that begins the movie. It's like a synthesis of all the movies that have been made about Australia up to this point in history. but my notes start before there, predictably, with the logo, the Walt Disney Pictures logo, which brought me to tears.
Yeah, it really was sweet to see it, wasn't it?
But
just classic.
And there's a but.
No.
This is just nostalgia, because
yeah,
when I look at it objectively, it's like a 90s corporate cut down of the wonder that was once the Walt Disney Pictures logo. So I think looking at it, you know, taking off the rose-tinted glasses, it speaks more to the machine that Disney is now than it was before. You know?
That's interesting.
It's sort of like, you know, now we're all lab rats wandering around their marketing mazes.
Yeah, because it's everywhere.
And I know, before anyone writes in, I know that the Disney organization in the 50s and 60s was a ruthless communist hunting machine, I know. But at least, you know, at least part of their capitalist model was to stress the authenticity of the human experience as a way to get people's money, sure.
Right.
So anyway, that's the logo.
All right. It just took me back to the nostalgia trip when I was a child, and I thought, oh.
Yeah, it did me too, and then I had to interrogate that because I thought, hang on a minute though, there's no splendor here, there's no magic. This is
it just turns into cardboard for you, like,
and then it goes
yeah.
Which is such a... And I was like, oh, I don't remember it being that awful and synthesized. And then I thought about it and thought, yeah, probably they were like, we got to cut down this logo. It's taking up too much of the... You know, we can pack in more.
We could do better.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, that first shot of when they zoomed through the leaf...
Mm-hmm.
And again, at this point, I hadn't clocked the computer animated possibility that made this a possibility. But I was just in awe of the multiplane animation and the kind of composition and camera work.
Me too.
And it reminds me, like, animation doesn't have to be about creating a fantasy world, because everything they do in this opening sequence is to me like the ultimate.
Is the natural world.
Yeah.
But... yeah.
It's the ultimate goal of cinema. All the techniques they're using, they're kind of using animation as hyper-realism, at least at this point in the movie. And I really appreciated that, like, the depth and dimension that they got out of
everything.
The animated frame, I thought was stunning. And then, you know, on level of content as well, the way that the images are kind of building this sense of the everyday of human life in the cabin. I mean, it's almost like a kind of proto Mike Judge film, something. You know? It's like it's not what you expect these days from Disney. Like starting out in this really grounded reality that looks like our own.
Yeah,
it looks like what it's supposed to be.
But like you said, I had the same note. I took note of sort of how lived in this boy's life was, and
with such a light touch.
And you know,
no dialogue, barely any dialogue, no faces. Right. This is something we should go back to in animation. No human faces. Human
We
faces
never see Mom.
complicate storytelling. And you don't hear that a lot.
I had this sense not until about 10 or 15 minutes later into the movie, of course, but I believe as the boy is walking out, Mom says something to him, and he says, "Don't worry, Mom." And in that moment, I wanted a video to play of his day for Mom to see what he was up to that day.
Yeah.
And just watch the sheer terror.
But it's great. Something I really admired, and again, I think this is something that the Disney and Disney Pixar movies have kind of lost. Like when he starts running through the woods and amassing animals,
Yeah.
there's this gradual ramping up of fantasy from reality.
Yeah.
Like it feels like, you know, I admire a lot of like Disney and Pixar's recent movies, but there's a sense that it just kind of like plonks you in the middle of this fantasy world. But here you have to run up to it, and by the time we get in the woods, there's a talking kangaroo. So you're like, okay, so
And
the
now we're good to
transition
go.
has been made.
Yeah, exactly.
But you need
by
that
the time he's done running,
Yeah, you need that segue. I
he's
think.
riding on the kangaroo's back, and they're the best of friends, and you buy it and accept it because of his collection of friends as he's running along.
And I prefer this approach to the common approach of a lot of Disney Pixar films in recent years,
Yeah,
which is to sort of drop you in the middle of a fantasy world and have all the characters ironically comment on how they're in a fantasy world. It's like, well, you made the decision to be in this fantasy world. Everyone in there should be acting like this is normal. They shouldn't be snarking about what they're doing, right?
But what's interesting is that they're snarking to catch you up to the world.
Right, exactly.
You know?
And it's just another way of doing it, but it's less interesting and more annoying, I think. And yet we've already spoken to this, but you know, this is still an era where they're happy to put children in real danger with real stakes, because that kid is straight up the mountain.
Oh man!
I mean, quicker than James T. Kirk at the beginning of Star Trek V. He's up that mountain.
My note was when the kangaroo says the eagle's up there, and I wrote down no, you don't climb that. Not appropriate.
And
no ropes. You know, he's just free climbing like he's Ethan Hunt.
Well, exactly. And speaking of that, you know, I was struck how, at least as far as the kid's concerned, there's no magic or superpowers here. He's literally climbing a mountain, taking a knife out of his pocket, and then cutting an eagle free. Like he's used, it's like whatever he's got in the world is all he has.
Is all on him already.
You know, and I guess another thing, like Disney's focused on fantasy beings with, you know, supernatural or, you know, otherworldly powers. Mm-hmm. And here it is, you know, just, and that fits with the Australianness of it, obviously.
It does, yeah, right.
So part of it is like that this is set in Australia, and the other part of it is like, well, Disney have chosen to set it in Australia so they can have the kids go through these bush trials.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And speaking to that, did you notice that, so as we said, he cuts the eagle free, but the eagle getting free means he's knocked off the top of this cliff.
Right.
And so you have the vertigo effect as he's falling.
Right.
And then the director chooses to focus on his face, which is tearing up because of the velocity of the wind. Yeah. I thought that made it twice as more frightening for me. I thought that was incredible.
It's using animation to make movies that feel more viscerally real. Which goes against the received wisdom of what we think cartoons are.
Yeah.
But you know what I like most about this scene? Dialogue kept to a minimum.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you're right about that for sure.
Right? To paraphrase Lisa Simpson, listen to the lines that they're not saying. I've actually wrote one here. Let's see if you can imagine this in a more recent
Okay.
Disney movie. Sitting in an eagle's nest on a mountain. That's not weird at all.
Oh, that's too much.
But I mean, they have no. There's no sense of this seed needs something else.
Mm-hmm.
They trust in what they've got and and like you say, you're sort of watching it on a level of pure visceral fear anyway.
Yeah,
so
right,
your brain
yeah.
doesn't have time to like deal with dialogue
to transpose.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
fantastic.
And then the point of view of the animal, of the eagle in flight, and the movement. Again, I don't know if this is computer enhanced or whether it's something they could do anyway, but kudos to them because they made the best cinematic choices in that situation.
Yeah, they do. They make all the best choices, and for a viewer, this is when you know when you're in a movie being made by Disney of this time.
Yes.
Because whenever that kid gets close to the ground is on the eagle, you're breathing a sigh of relief, and the next thing you know, he's flying off a waterfall or some other shit to some other death-defying feat, and you kind of tense up over, his now being unsafe yet again.
And I was trying to, as this was going on, because it seems not so alien now in animated kids films that this kind of stuff happens. I was like, so why is this happening? Australia? Yes, that's part of it.
Yeah, right.
This is a different kind of kids film because it was made in the, at the end of the 1980s. Got it. But I was also but there's some part of this that it's so dark and so deadly. There's still nothing to account for it. It's sort of like, it's like the next few scenes are like something from The Walking Dead. I mean,
Yes, right.
when he's trapped in that pit. I mean, there's an episode of Walking Dead where that basically happens.
Yeah, sure.
And then there's the Komodo dragon jump scare. I was sort of like, well, that's an actual horror technique. So, why are we choosing this? I mean, it's brilliantly done. I jumped out of my seat.
Yeah.
And then this is another great. This is another great moment where whoever the actor is voicing this kid just abandons his Australian accent at this point.
That's right.
Quicker than Connery in the Untouchables. He's just like, he's just like, look, I gave the Australian thing, I gave it a go.
I gave it
it's
a whirl.
It's not working out for me. It's time
All right,
to just
why don't we
go
take a
standard
break?
American.
All right, why don't we take a break then?
Yeah,
We've
let's
got a
see if
good
this
jump.
child gets out of the pit. And even if he does, I'm sure some other horrible act will befall him.
It's going to be on the barrel of a gun, I can tell you that much.
He's probably safer staying in that pit.
All right, we'll be right back, everyone, right after this.
I like to think I know something about beer, but nowadays even I get overwhelmed when confronted by the exhaustive selection of craft beers they have at bars, breweries, and even grocery stores. Back in the day you had one, maybe two craft beers to choose from, and if you were confused, you ordered a Guinness. But in beerstinations like San Diego, the craft beer options lately are in double, sometimes even triple digits. So what's a beer drinker to do? You need what I need, the Vegas Beer Guys. Your beer of choice should be a perfect blend of malt and hops. And so a live show about beer needs that same balance. And the Vegas Beer Guys matches beer expert Dan Aker with self-proclaimed beer novice Stephen J. Weiss. The results are eminently drinkable. They're on Facebook, they're on Instagram. They'll try new beers, they'll tell you about beer. Think of them as your beer Sherpas guiding you up a foamy-headed mountain to reach the peak of your pint. God, I need a beer.
As promised, we're back. Tom and I are here discussing The Rescuers Down Under, yet another 1990 single sequel. They never end.
As far as we know.
So far as we know, this is the last one. I think we
But
already.
as you know, we've
Yeah.
been wrong before.
I think we talked either on air or off air or both that a year from now we can't wait to see what other 4 movies we missed from 1990.
So save us the trouble, right? If you know of a 1990
Send it
sequel
in.
near you,
Yeah.
let us know because we can still do something about it.
So we've been talking about this, about how all these movies feel like the same movie.
Yes.
And it's remarkable that there are
It really
8
is.
single sequels from a single year that
Yeah,
all
2
feel
of
like
them-
the same story.
They all feel like the same story. 2 of them are made by Disney. 2 of them are revivals of 1970s properties.
It's unbelievable.
Most of them have quite a gap between
Yeah,
this
yeah,
and
exactly.
the original. Even Gremlins is like 6 years.
Mhm.
Young Guns, I think, as well, is a good few years. Another
Yeah, that's
48
probably
hours.
the shortest one. 48 Hours is 8 years. 'Cause
Wow,
that's
Young Guns is the shortest one.
yeah,
That's
that's saying
saying
something.
something.
I don't know about the Trolls universe, but
Well, as we know, that's a lore unto itself.
hard to distinguish.
I think if you broke down Troll or Trolls 2, you could, you'd probably find a lot of overlap
Right.
thematically.
You might even find a troll eventually.
That's right, yeah. It's like, at least the rescuers go down under in this movie.
Yeah. Now, how much
Because
do you remember from the
Ain't no
original
trolls in
movie?
Troll 2. I've never seen the original movie,
Oh, wow.
and I've never seen this.
I
This
had
series passed me by.
I had not seen this, but I saw the original in the theater as a little kid and loved it. Yeah, I mean, I was a I was a big time fan of the original Rescuers. I always liked the idea that it's a bunch of rats and mice working under the United Nations as their own United Nations.
Oh yeah. And you know what's great? I'm only speaking for this movie, but I love how carefully crafted that mice world was, without putting too fine a point on everything.
Mm-hmm.
There's the sequence that's coming up with where they make pea soup out of a single pea,
Yeah.
and then they take it to the table, and then they're in this restaurant, which is just a normal restaurant, but they're mice. And I thought, this is really good world building, for want of a better term.
Yeah. And their restaurant is, near the regular restaurant. So they got a pea that dropped on the ground from that restaurant.
And it's a very, and I'm sure the Rescuers came up with this first, but it's very similar to The Great Mouse Detective, because they're the mice that live underneath Sherlock Holmes' house.
Yeah.
So
Right.
they're doing everything that the people on the in the world are doing.
Yeah.
But before we get to
Don't fix it if it ain't broken.
before we get to the stars of the movie, the titular rescuers,
Oh, yeah.
we've got to meet McLeish,
Oh, well.
George C. Scott.
George C. Scott, and I just love everything about his performance. And
He's a really good
there
bush
is
maniac. You
He
could throw
is.
him in any
And there-
horror film about the Australian outback, and he would continue to be as scary.
he would just be great.
I thought two things, in terms of foreshadowing. I thought someone remembered this when they were writing the Bob Peck character in Jurassic Park. Because at one point he says, "Good girl, Joanna."
Yeah, right.
And I also thought that his vocal
Clever girl.
his vocal performance really laid the groundwork for all of Ed Asner's future animated voiceover work. Ed Asner really picked up this mantle.
Well, and there's a lot going on. It's funny. We've talked before about say, the Poltergeist series, like a real lack of respect for dead actors and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And this series does the opposite, because the first Rescuers had Orville, who was an albatross, I believe. And the actor died. The voice actor died.
Jim Jordan.
I think 2 years before this. Yeah, Jim Jordan died a couple years before this
88.
movie came out.
Probably while this was in development.
Right. So John Candy takes over, but they're not going to let him be the original character. They create a new character.
He's his brother.
His brother.
Yeah. So this
How
like
great is
Disney's first attempt at a sequel, and they're already dropping ambassadors like they're hot.
Right?
We got a surrogate brother.
We've got ourselves a surrogate. Not only that, but it's Orville and Wilbur.
Yeah.
So you've got a Wright brothers joke.
Yeah. It's really interesting how given that they're dipping their toes into the world of animated sequels, how quickly they're picking up the language. In this.
Yeah, right. Our language.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. And I guess I was when I and the very first time because I'd never seen the Rescuers, the first time I was introduced to the titular Rescuers. In the restaurant, they're like a glamorous detective duo who are kind of on the verge of marriage, will be married by the end of the film. And I thought,
that's a runner.
There's more than a few shades of the Thin Man series. And I wondered how much it was kind of harking back to that, because that's a very early film series. Like, it ran through end of the 1930s, beginning of the 1940s. A series of films all called The Thin Man, with the set all.
I know of The Thin Man, but I haven't seen them.
Well, we should do them on the show. They're formative sequels. So I guess what I'm saying is, there are even though this is new for Disney, there are still precedents that they're drawing on.
Sure. Yeah.
We talked in the Two Jakes episode about when you do sequels that involve detectives, you can either continue the case or just have the detective
have a new case.
And this takes the road less traveled.
Less traveled by the Two Jakes, right?
So I kind of it dovetails in that way as well.
Well, what's interesting is we talked about the sort of story troubles you can get into. That the Two Jakes does get into by keeping.
Yeah.
The last case, you know?
And this is just a clean break.
And you get the complete opposite here, and it's a clean break with new characters. And I mean, let's talk Bob Newhart and Ava Gabor.
Just before that, I just wanted to mention that this is
go ahead.
When we see the first time we see New York. Well, firstly, I like how Disney are using their best customer relations by having the map stop at a U.S. city somewhere near where you live. When you're watching the movie, kind of Al Roker style.
Yeah.
And then when you see New York in animated form, this was when I got the sense that computer animation was used. Because when I saw the buildings, the first thing I thought was Minecraft. And then I did a bit of research. I was like, computer animation system, that makes sense. Minecraft is harking back to early computer graphics. So this, of course, that's why it looks like Minecraft. Anyway, let's meet the Rescuers.
Well, so, I mean, having not seen the first film, do you feel connected to these two?
I wasn't lost. It didn't go above my head. No, I mean, but this, it's like that.
Oh, I don't mean that, but
No, I know what you mean.
It's like,
yeah.
I have this familial idea of these two characters because I kind of grew up with them. So.
Well, I grew up with Bob Newhart, so
But I was just gonna say that you probably grew up with Bob Newhart, so.
And his comedic persona is so all-consuming. The portly body of a cartoon mouse does nothing to contain it, right? It's like every time he speaks, you can see Bob Newhart like a phantom,
hand in glove.
And the movie's pretty good with the sort of catch-up storytelling, where it's sort of like they're preceded by their reputation. Like, even if you didn't know what happened in the first movie, they basically tell you that they did a case like this before. so they're the
Yeah,
right people
right.
for the job. I'm like, that's fine. I'm all caught up.
Right. And they don't belabor the point
They don't
either.
belabor anything. I mean, it's an hour and a 17-minute movie, which, as we discussed off bike, I think is a perfect length for any movie, animated or otherwise. And it's when we get into, like you say, the proposal part of the movie is the runner, and the first time he does it, the first time he tries to propose and is interrupted, you're like, this is probably going to turn into a runner. But it doesn't outstay its welcome.
Never, because I think they stick to the rule of 3, don't they?
And every time they do it, they're in very short bursts. Like, they don't base whole scenes about it. This is advanced comic writing.
This is the most in-depth and involved it gets is in this first scene, because the rings get knocked around Indiana Jones style. Or Temple of Doom style. So he's running around the restaurant looking for his fucking ring.
And they meet Wilbur, and he's got Lao Che Airlines sort of stenciled on the side of him. Well, this is where they meet. This is where they meet Wilbur. We learn that the air service is now under new management, which is a great a great way of making the transition. He says, my brother Orville told me all about you, so he's
caught up, so we're caught up. We're fine.
I like it when the characters in my movies aren't behind the 8 ball. This is my biggest problem with pretty much every season of Picard, is Picard's like 10 steps behind everyone else. I'm like, fucking hell, Picard. I know you're 90, but come on.
Get your shit together.
Yeah. And then he gets his shit together, and then the show's over. This really made me wish for an alternate reality in which Robin Williams did this and John Candy did the genie. I don't.
Oh, interesting.
I was gonna say I don't mean to speak ill of the dead, but they're both dead, so I'm not discriminating.
You don't think either one is in their wheelhouse?
No. John Candy has such a gift for this.
Mm-hmm.
He's playing all the same notes as the Robin Williams genie, but it's never too much,
right?
And it never gets wearing. Also, possibly because John Candy is from an improv background, all the jokes are probably not stolen from other comics. So, but it's the same thing, right? They're just letting Candy flex his improv skills, and then they're animating around him.
I don't think... I mean, this comes later in the movie, but... Man, did I have myself a good old chuckle when he said it feels like my head's in a vice grip. Turns out it was.
Yeah.
I thought that was fantastic. That just reminded me of a time and a place where a joke like that is told and just kind of works.
Candy's got a real gift for that.
It just made me so happy.
Candy always had a joke for the joke that was so obvious it didn't need to be said. Because the best gag in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is the scene after Steve Martin gets picked up by the cab driver by his balls, and he turns to him and says, I've never seen a man picked up by his testicles before. So, I think Candy has a real gift for this.
Yeah.
It's a real niche for him. Also, the music department is on the money here as well, because he's listening to rock and roll in his little hangar, and they fold in.
You can't hear anyone.
They fold in when he's taking off. They fold in a little Dick Dale guitar sound to it. So somebody on that music team knows their rock and roll. Here's the thing. What do you think of, speaking of the early 90s, what do you think of Cowabunga?
Oh. I mean, it's got, it's Bart Simpson related.
I mean, The Simpsons is already on the air, so I wonder what is...
So I have to imagine they're capitalizing on... I'm sure Bart had said it by then, right?
But
it's a catchphrase.
But is there like a common common source for both? Or is...
I would say on the peripheral, like on the edges, you know, it became so ubiquitous because of Bart Simpson
for sure.
that it's hard to decipher that. But yeah, I mean, it feels like a kind of surfer dude, we'd heard that before kind of thing. But
I think this is the thing, it made me realize, and this is adjacent to a conversation you and Matt Aldrich have had on the Project 1982 podcast about good cute and bad cute. E.T. is good cute, Jar Jar's bad cute. But the other consideration for this is, I think, there's certain things you can get away with when it's a animated character in an animated film, an animated character in a live action film, but you can't get away with it when it's a animated live action character in a live action film. So if Jar Jar did this, I'd hate it. If Roger Rabbit did it, it'd be fine. When Wilbur does it, it's fine. I think that's it. That's the cutoff point. If the world around you is conducive to it.
Yeah. Also, I just want to say, Albatross Airlines. That's funny.
That's a got a nice Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner joke in there. Who says Who says Disney's low culture? And this is another huge impasse. Well, I guess it's been an impasse from minute one. The decision to set it in Australia. It's a travel sequel.
Yeah. Right.
And
I mean, we should have mentioned that right up top, shouldn't we?
We should have mentioned that right. Well, we didn't know how
It's the impasse of all impasses.
It is, but, you know, I guess, well, is it a travel sequel? Because it begins in Australia, and the rescuers...
Still, they have to travel there. Not that it takes long.
From their perspective, it's a travel film. From our perspective, they're coming to us. So I guess, like, partly it's that. Partly it's a sequel, so we've got to go to another country. And then the other half of it, I guess, is the sort of zeitgeist of Aussie love in this period, sort of late 80s, early 90s. There's quite an affection for Australia in popular culture. As explored, explored in
Crocodile
that
Dundee
episode.
and yes, Simpsons go there. You know, once Crocodile Dundee hit the scene, I guess, you know, there's a period of, 5 to 8 years where we're going to be fascinated by anything Australia. And so there are things that are going to glom onto it. It's kind of like we talked about the late 70s movies where other movies are glomming on to the disaster films and that kind of thing. So
I guess the only remnants of that is the Outback Steakhouse chain.
Yes.
Which shows no signs of declining.
For reasons beyond me.
Even John Mulaney talks about Outback Steakhouses in his new special. And again, once we go back to Australia, we're back in a full-on horror movie. There's abandoned mines, red rocks. There's a bush maniac wielding a chainsaw. I mean, it's just crazy. It's crazy to me.
The little boy and all his fuzzy animal friends are all locked up in cages.
I mean, that's it. Yeah, it's
like Silence of the Lambs in there, for fuck's sake.
It really is. It makes me, in a perverse way, it makes me glad I didn't see this as a child, because I remember how much The Great Mouse Detective affected me, and that is
really
incredibly scary. There's a couple of shots in that movie that still make me kind of like
shiver
right now. Yeah. So I'm actually. So I think it's fantastic. Then the
But did you notice, like, there are little things going back to my point earlier? When the rescuers arrive, one of the first things we see, without them commenting on it, is the Sydney Opera House.
Right, and the Sydney, like, this was when, now I knew it was a computer animation system. I was like, oh, okay,
sure.
Well, this is computer generated. But I was also like, and in the spirit of how it's used in the movie, was like, it's just adding to the art. It doesn't detract from anything.
Yeah. It's just there.
Yeah. And this is, I mean, this is a kind of unwritten rule of when you're using any kind of new visual technology, is you want to put it in places where it won't impact the story of the movie. So if for some reason this didn't work, it wouldn't be any loss to the movie if you didn't see the Sydney Opera House.
Yeah, I suppose that's true, but you...
Like The Abyss or Jurassic Park, like, you know...
Yeah, right.
It's like, these are our money shots, but you can narratively do without them.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying, but they add to the spectacle, too.
Yeah, they add to the spectacle. There'd be worse movies without them, but they're also clever enough to write them in a way that they happen at moments where if you need to refilm it as something else, you can.
Yeah,
like,
right,
no one's
right.
spending the movie
Yeah.
going, did you see that big... Well, I guess they are saying, did you see that big dinosaur?
Yeah.
Forget everything I just said. It's kind of the point of Jurassic Park.
They're taking their glasses off in astonishment, Tom.
We need to timestamp this. The moment that Tom on this podcast said, nobody in Jurassic Park is walking around saying, hey, did you see that big dinosaur? The title of the movie could have been, hey, did you see that big dinosaur? Anyway, I was interested to see the origins of the Pixar style of everything being a pun for whatever the key difference is in the world you're in. So when they're landing, our air traffic control mice
Jake?
ranger says, "Wise fly."
Yeah.
So that could be a whole animated series by itself. Wise flies.
Wise flies.
Yeah, it's just Goodfellas with flies. I guess they've already done that with Goodfellas.
Good feathers?
You don't know Goodfellas? The Animaniacs segment.
Oh, I never really watched Animaniacs.
Mike, you've got to see Goodfellas.
Like sporadically.
Goodfellas
Very sporadically.
They're pigeons. There's a Robert De Niro. There's the pigeons based on the characters from Goodfellas.
That's amazing.
There's a Tommy pigeon, there's a Jimmy pigeon, and there's a Henry Hill pigeon. Seriously.
I'm going to go get the pellets. Get the pellets.
That is literally what it's like for kids.
That's great.
With and it's Warner Brothers, so nobody's getting sued.
Yeah, good times.
I
like
think
it.
This is the air traffic control skit. This is where I forgot I was in a cartoon.
Really?
because I was like, the xenophobia, the characters, the situation. It just plays so real. like I forget that they're cartoon mice and a cartoon bird.
I can never figure out in these movies why birds can't just land. They always have to. They always have to.
It's a
crash and tumble.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all for comedic effect, but I remember that from the first movie.
Here is a weakness, a legitimate weakness of this film. We've been nothing but glowing so far, but I will level this against the movie.
All right.
They don't make the in-world rules very clear.
That's true.
Because there are animals that talk and there are animals that don't, and we don't know why one doesn't.
Some humans can hear them, some humans cannot. Yeah, all of those rules are
That's my biggest note for this movie. A couple of lines of dialogue to cover that would have helped, but it's not a biggie. But
I'll say this for it. It seems. What's the boy's name?
I just keep referring to him as the final girl. Because that's basically his role in this film.
Yeah. Well, anyway, my point was that I always felt as though the movie does seem to be saying that the boy is so in touch with nature that he gets to hear all the animals. That may,
Okay.
I could at least buy that.
I can buy that, but it feels like there's something that Disney normally pay attention to that they don't pay attention to here.
That they don't, yeah. I agree.
But it's not. In other respects, it's very easy to invest in this world, so
yeah,
I guess it's just not a big deal.
Now the movie takes some time here to introduce Jake, who's basically Crocodile Dundee.
Sure.
But
in a somewhat self-aware.
Yes.
Like Crocodile Dundee's already become a trope, and we're playing with that trope.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Which again It's more advanced comic writing than you might expect from the
Than you would
Rescuers Down
expect,
Under.
yes.
I particularly
and what-
like that when he's looking at the map and he's listing all these
Yes.
dangerous place names, and then Bob Newhart, I'm not going to call him whatever his character is in the film, he picks up the
Bernard, baby.
he picks up the map and he's like, I don't see any of that on the map.
Yeah.
It's just an empty map, and it's like there's an awareness that we're dealing with a kind of a mythical Australia
Yeah,
that we've
exactly.
seen in
Yes.
movies.
And what I like is, this movie takes the time to introduce this sort of relationship complication,
Yeah.
but it's not ever dwelling on it, and you can tell that it's all only in Bernard's mind.
And it's dealt with at the end.
Yeah, exactly as it should be.
Exactly. Just, again,
Yeah.
like I feel like this is another film I would show to prospective screenwriters. It'd be like, see what you can do in this amount of time.
Right, exactly. All right, well, our heroes are about to try and save the boy. Why don't we take one more break, and then we'll come back and we'll finish up. How about that?
Yeah, sure. And let's talk
Contain
about
your enthusiasm.
let's talk about how all Disney snakes look the same when we come back.
Yes, indeed. They do, don't they? You're so right. The Jungle Book, they took that snake right out of the jungle.
Maybe it's a sequel to that as well. Who knows?
All right, we'll be right back. If you like podcasts like I do, boy, do I have a treat for you. You need to
Stay on target.
and check out the Sounds and Cinema podcast. Listen as your host, sound designer and music creator Tony Parham, and co-host, musical performer and sound lover Derek Hansen, D-Rock if you're nasty, and I am, discuss all things sound related to film, television, stage, and theatrical productions. They discuss environmental sounds, bioacoustics, dialogue, the nature of communication through sound, but as an added bonus, they drink beer and try to
Stay on target.
find them wherever you get your podcasts and listen to the pure mania of a man who can charitably be described as Doug, the dog from Up, and another man with a soothing and sultry voice trying to get that man to...
Stay on target.
That's the Sounds and Cinema podcast. Tune in and listen to the sounds they are creating just for you. Tom and I are back, everyone. Did you miss us? The Rescuers Down Under is going down. This is the last segment. Here we are. We're going to finish up.
We're in the last 10 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, exactly. It'll take us only 45, 50, I'm sure. But this is an underrated film.
I agree.
And
Well,
I was
the
surprised.
consensus has obviously turned in its favor, but
I guess, yeah. I mean, it's weird to decipher 30 years later what's going on with Rotten Tomatoes,
true.
because we know that things change in time, and I'd love to have more of a sense of what people thought at the time.
Yeah. It's it really works. Some of it is really beautiful. I mean, again, you just sort of. I don't know if it helps to judge it against other Disney animated features or
That's
not.
the thing. It does seem like it's a Disney film unto itself.
Yeah. Yeah,
'Cause it's
I would
writing
give it
the
a
old
chance
and
in
the
its own
new.
right. Yeah.
And it feels like that, and so it gives you a nostalgia feel, but it also feels like it's doing something different.
It's
And
full
in that
of
way,
sweet-
it's a time
Yeah.
capsule that's really interesting to look at.
It's an absolute time capsule, and we should definitely go back to it and reinvent the wheel, because it tells us a lot about how.
Well, you've mentioned several times how to
digital
write.
Well, on a visual level, how digital style could have gone and could have been used to enhance reality rather than distract us from it.
Right. Because what's interesting is it's got moments of feeling like Don Bluth kind of stuff,
Yeah.
but still
agree
manages
with
to
that.
feel like the new stuff that Disney was starting to churn out that it started with the year prior with Little Mermaid.
And it's full of scenes that, I was gonna say, don't deserve to be in here, but the movie is better because of them.
Well, we might be talking about the same.
I think we are.
We're gonna come up on, I think, my favorite part of this movie.
Oh, I don't think we are then.
Oh,
this is not an enjoyable scene.
Oh, well, I love when McLeach has the eggs.
Oh, sure.
And is
going
back.
But I'm talking
forth.
about the scene prior, when, which is a cutaway to back to the cabin where a ranger's bringing.
Oh yeah.
his mother a backpack.
A backpack.
I was like, what a poignant, understated, elegant, dramatic scene to throw in at this point.
Yeah, right.
It's just really high functioning storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And also,
because it gets you in the cockles of the heart.
It does, and once again done with minimal dialogue and no faces.
Certainly not Mom's face.
It reminds me.
Yeah, no faces. You don't get the Rangers. His back is to you.
In a different effect, but it reminds me of an execution of the scene from Bambi with the hunter.
Yeah, right.
Which has it has the same emotional resonance, but for a very different reason. But also, when you get to the end of the movie and you're like, hey, why aren't we circling back to the reunion between him and his mother? And I'm like, well, I've already had that scene with the backpack. I mean, can't really get any more emotional than that.
Yeah.
So we guess we don't need it because this film did its job. And now I've got a half an hour extra to do something else.
Right, with my time. It's so interesting.
I don't have to watch emotional reunions between people for 20 minutes.
Yeah, it's kudos to you for picking up on that. The idea that there's no way a movie today would excise that reunion scene with Mom.
No.
No way.
But it is. I don't know if it's linked to this, but that scene, like all the emotions you would play out in that final scene have already been in the movie, so there's no need for it in the movie. Mm-hmm. sounds quite ruthless when I put it like that, but
you monster.
Screen time is important. Screen time is valuable real estate. If you don't need it,
well, should be.
Sell it off. But anyway, let's talk about eggs.
I think that is just a wonderful comedic bit that feels vaudevillian and it sounds so stupid to say because
no, it doesn't.
George C. Scott's not really speaking, but it because of the animation and because he's feels so connected to the character, it's like I'm watching George C. Scott do amazing work. But it's the animators, and it's all in camera, one shot, kind of a medium range shot, and everything about it to me is delightful. Because you can see thought processes, and it's fucking great. I love everything about it.
When Disney first came out with its comedy shorts, it really was taking the lead from the silent comedians and what they did.
Yeah, right.
So this lineage is I think really important. I think that that animation started out as a vehicle for slapstick. Mm-hmm. And when you see remnants of it here, and you're absolutely right, it's like a Buster Keaton setup.
Yeah, right.
It's whilst also dreaming about child torture. That's another kind of genre fusion that they've got here. But it's
I love the button on it
strengths of Disney at it plays the strengths of Disney at its best, and there's a ton of that in this film. Mm-hmm. Like the Bambi, the scene,
yeah, right.
The faceless scene, which makes you think of all the other faceless scenes in Disney history and how well they work emotionally, and you're like, do we really need faces in films? Is that where it all went wrong?
I love the button because it reveals character too. I love that McLeach, after a good solid 60 to 90 seconds of wrestling with trying to figure out who's getting his eggs.
Yeah.
As he's dealing with it with Joanna, that his button line is, "You small brain creature, you can't get one passed on me." And you just see the folly of a very stupid man. There's nothing better to me than an aggressively stupid person, and that's what this character is in the moment, and it's super funny.
And that's what's great about Laurel and Hardy, you know, aggressive stupidity.
Yeah.
So yeah, no wonder. And you know what? I just have some notes here about the digging in the sandstorm and how lifelike that looks.
Yeah.
Again, this sort of hyper realism achieved with animation. And more on the sort of like unsanitized violence. It's like animals fighting with guns. It's like like the violence in these films. This is an interesting point. It's like, is there this level? You get moments like this in Disney films now, but I don't feel the jeopardy and threat in the way I do in this movie or movies of this era. Like I don't feel like it's going to happen to me. It's happening to me or someone like me.
Yeah, right.
And that's how I kind of feel. And like even in Toy Story 3, where you have that the incinerator scene, which is one of the darkest things ever in a Disney film, you're still sort of like, well, these toys are not supposed to be alive anyway, so what's the worst that could happen? It's not like I'm sort of like, you know, this could be my kid, or that could have been me as a kid, or something like that. Like, it feels like it actually gets to you because there's no fantasy, I guess. I mean, there's all the talking animals, but apart from that...
But I still know what you mean, because there's a real boy in jeopardy at
all
the center
time,
of all this.
like continually throughout the film.
From minute one. It never stops.
And a great sign that computer animation is not going to affect the level of detail in Disney films is when we see the boys released. McLeish is tricking him into revealing the location of the eagle eggs, and then the eagle's nest, the leaves and the hay are all different colors, different levels of decay. Like someone has put a ton of thought into drawing them, creating them, what they would look like in reality, how we do that in animation.
Yeah.
If I was wary of animation and computer animation in 1990, this would be a good sign for me that attention to detail is not going to disappear just because we can farm some of it off to a machine that only two guys can work.
Agreed.
Also, interesting that along with the other Disney 1990 single sequel this year, there's a film in which a man is trying to propose to a woman throughout the movie and failing.
And not doing it.
How weird is that?
That's funny.
Is there some playbook we've not seen
from Disney itself?
Well, yeah, Disney are just like, I don't care if you're making a Touchstone live action or an animated feature.
I want
These
proposals.
Are the rules. I love talking about playing to strengths. You know, writing it so Bob Newhart ends up being in scenes where he's the only one talking.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a good, you know, it's like playing to his strengths as a monologist.
Yeah.
As the monologist comedian.
Yeah, right.
It's like the ability, sort of doing his one-sided phone call as a monologue.
So good.
Yeah. And then we get a song.
And I mean, yeah, we do.
Which reminds you that this movie's not a musical.
Yes. So there's that, and so much so...
It's just a straight-ahead horror film.
And I remember reading that when George C. Scott's character is singing, it's not him. Somebody else sings the song.
Oh, I see. That's where he drew the line.
I guess so. I just maybe he thought, no, I'm not the guy. I'm not good enough.
I'm not singing that shit. I played Patton.
I was just gonna say, this is no Patton, all right?
What about Doctor Strangelove? That was a little,
Yeah, right.
little offbeat.
But I also was gonna say, you know, for character arc reasons, you know, our hero Bernard, Bob Newhart, he's going through this whole movie basically just wanting to propose, and he keeps getting kind of foiled, and he can't do it, and he seems bumbling and chubby and ill-prepared, and all those things are happening to him. And then, of course, this movie has him become the hero.
Yeah.
Which is really smart writing, you know, because you get to see why Bianca's in love with him in the first place, because this is who he is at his core and all that. You know, I love that he gets the Razorback and he's got plans and he you know.
Yeah. It's true. And also, we haven't mentioned what's happening to Wilbur. I don't know if we're both a little worried about triggering each other, but some of the darkest shit in this movie is happening to Wilbur.
Yes, for sure.
In between these scenes.
I mentioned the vice on the head earlier.
Yeah. He somehow ended up in a hospital which is dedicated to torture.
And
primarily, above all else.
I couldn't for 1 second figure out if this doctor really was malevolent, which he seems to be, or if there was something altruistic that we didn't know about, because the movie doesn't seem to present it.
No, well, yeah, it's sort of I guess it's, you know, that's part of slapstick as well, is that sort of good intentions, which ends up hurting people. But I was really taken aback by it. It was sort of torture sequence upon torture sequence, all being played for laughs.
When it got to a certain point where he was tied up and trying to escape, that's when my heart really started to race in that moment, I noticed.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know if they're misjudging the tone or whether they're going for horror comedy.
Yeah, right.
I suspect they might be going for horror comedy.
Because that's Disney's way.
At this time, it seems to be. Like, there's at least there's no contradiction between the two.
Mm-hmm.
They got there ahead of Sam Raimi.
You know what's funny, too, is, you know, you're talking about an hour and 17-minute movie, whatever it is, and your titular characters do not meet the boy until about 59 minutes into the movie.
Yeah.
None of it matters. It all works.
No. Yeah. It doesn't overplay its hand, does it?
I mean, it just seems like something you might complain about in another movie.
Yeah.
But there's something in this movie that makes it work. It's oddly efficient.
Yeah, and I don't know how much that efficiency historically is to do with how hard it is to make these movies and how long it takes. Right. But by this time, you've got to think that it's sort of cemented into a storytelling formula where we're just used to telling stories quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the shortest Disney animated feature is Dumbo, which was all the way back in 1940, which is like an hour and something, you know, a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
So it can't not affect the way that you tell story and the efficiency that you do it with, but it's retrospectively it's a very pleasant experience when scenes don't outstay their welcome and everything ties up without you wanting more.
Yeah.
And or less. Like you're
yes, exactly. Yeah, I'm done. I was done 25 minutes ago.
Yeah,
you don't want that feeling. Yeah.
So I'm sure it's for a lot of different reasons, but that doesn't mean it's any less satisfying.
No. Yeah.
And even, you know, the way that the villain's fate plays out and the child's last minute rescue. Like, obviously, it's cliched and conventional, and there's a mechanics behind that. But again, it's just done straight.
But
down
it's
the
done.
middle, and I
Yeah,
appreciate
exactly.
that.
Yeah, I did too.
And they don't kill McLeish, but they also don't leave him in a particularly good situation. So,
Right.
and you know the boy's going to be rescued, but they leave it to the last second, and it's fine.
Well, not just that, but there was a moment where I thought the boy wouldn't hit the water, and he did. And,
Yes.
And we have a different kind
So
of rescue.
actually, after the moment you expect him to be rescued.
Yeah.
Yeah. It has the golden eye cliffhanger moment out of the waterfall.
Yeah, you're right. That's great.
And
Different view though from the ground.
While I was watching this, and again, this is sort of comparing it to, I guess, more recent movies, which are more bloated. They end on Wilbur sitting on the eggs at night, and it's all done with audio, which is proof that animation doesn't have to be visual for it to be effective. And
at least when you got John Candy.
Well, that's it. I mean, but it's sort of defying your expectations of what animation is and could be in a very satisfying way. And while I'm watching it, I'm like, oh, it's interesting that there's no follow up with either the rescuers or the mother, but it still works. And then you remind yourself it still works as an ending and wraps up that part of the story.
We got the essentials. We know the boy is safe.
Yeah.
We know he's going to get home to mom. We know that they're going to get married. And now we know that the eggs have hatched. We have everything we need.
We do. We literally have everything we need. And not a second more is wasted.
Exactly.
I mean, it's a at this point it's about story relevance, right? Is anything to happen, everything that we'd see after this point have any relevance to the story? Well,
Nope.
No.
No is the answer. And that's why it's gone. So do you think, because I mentioned earlier that there's no way that we wouldn't have that final scene. So what is the necessity for a Disney movie today to feel like they have to show you that? Like to give you one more tear? To try and make you well up one more time?
Yeah, manipulation.
The manipulation and over sentimentality kind of a...
Which, I mean, I'm sure the moments we're talking about would be very affecting, but when I see a movie like this, I sort of, if you layer that in early enough, you actually don't need it.
Yeah.
So, again, it's sort of by contrast. Less is more.
Right. Certainly in this case. I mean, I just think it's interesting that this movie proves what you don't need.
Yeah, and it's
almost defiantly.
and maybe it's out of necessity rather than maybe if they had all the resources at their disposal, they'd make different choices. But I like that they're willing to draw a line under a story when it's done.
Yeah.
And say the end.
Goodbye. You're still here? Go home. Ferris Bueller, get the hell out of here.
Yeah. Or as I guess the 1990 single sequel version would be Daffy Duck.
Yes. You're right.
Who actually does address the camera during the credits.
You're right.
These are all the same movie.
They are. Good times.
I had a great time with this.
And I did. I was so pleasantly surprised by this movie. I really did not think I was going to enjoy it. I had an idea in my head of what this movie was, and it wasn't that.
No.
And we already spoke many times to where this movie lies in the history of time of animation, which makes it even more interesting to watch.
Yeah.
But when you get right down to it, I think it's just a well-made movie.
I agree. Yeah, from whichever way you approach it.
Yeah.
It's a well-made movie, yeah.
Any last notes for you?
Well, of course I have a credit check.
I mean, besides that, of course.
No in-movie notes, no.
All right. I'm at the end of my bird ride as well. Credit check me.
All right. Suggested by characters created by.
This made me I saw that, and it interested me so
fuck
much
does that mean?
because we had the same conversation about Three Men and a Little Lady.
And that's the note I have. It's like how removed from the source material
Right.
can you be? This is 3 times removed.
But I also remember that I think The Rescuers is
It's a book series.
it's a book series, but it's like Miss Bianca and the Rescuers or something like that.
Yeah.
So my mind went to that when I saw the credit as well. That like, you know, the original material, source material was books.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which, you know, is still. It's still pretty much everything Disney do is based on some source text. Even The Great Mouse Detective, I think, is a children's book. Before it was Disney film. Obviously, in The Little Mermaid, they're still
Yeah, right.
pulling out the Lion King, I suppose, is the one that breaks with that tradition.
Maybe.
Featuring the voice talents of, which I thought was such a Disney way to head those credits. It's like you could see that kind of verbiage on Main Street in Disneyland.
Right.
Panpipes.
Nice.
The 1990s is coming. An ominous forewarning of the music that will populate the next decade.
Well, we know where you lie.
And eventually lie dormant in its gas station bargain bins. Oh, this is great. This is the first time I've ever found a person in the credits who might be a relative of yours.
What?
There's a Michael A. Shansis.
I didn't notice that.
So
Slipped by me.
ideally Michael Shantz.
Wait, what was the first name?
Michael A. Shansis.
Oh, wow.
Your name is also Michael. Just to remind.
Well,
to let you know.
you said the A. I remember the A because my brother's name is Andrew, so I thought
Oh.
I was thinking it was Andy, but
This could be your German cousin.
yeah, wow. How do they spell
so
that?
like you with an IS.
Wow. All right.
Yeah. Again, going back to one of our other 1990 single sequels, I can't remember which one. The music editing is also done by Segway Music. Now, this is the second time this company have featured in a 1990 single sequel. And this is the second time I'm going to complain about the name of the company. Segway Music is the product you are providing. It is not, should not be the name of your company.
I want to say that was the Two Jakes. Didn't we just talk about that?
I think so.
Yeah.
We definitely talked about it. I don't remember in the context of which movie. But it was a 1990 single sequel. For
They're
sure.
all running together.
They really are. You can't just call a company Balloons. That's what you make. It's not what you are. Among the additional voices is Mike McGowan, well-known improv comedian of the time, also in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
Yeah.
As Friar Tuck, but I remember him being on Whose Line Is It? The British Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Yeah, I was going to say, I remember British episodes.
So clearly they're drawing on the world of improv comedy to fill out their characters. It's sort of like... Because he's like a John Candy type. So they're going to the well. I was interested to see San Diego Zoo and Safari Park was thanked.
No, I missed that too.
So I don't know if this is where the animators went to learn how to draw the animals. Maybe they were researching sounds. I don't know.
Maybe they were researching sadness.
What do you mean?
You know, a
Do you
bunch
think
of
it
locked
is a
up
sad
animals. So that they could
Well,
put
what
them
you
in.
described there is a zoo. I don't think San Diego Zoo is any. It's like it's breaking the mold on that.
That's what I mean. You
Well,
got
yeah.
you got a
Oh, I
bunch of
agree.
you got a bunch of animals locked up in cages in this movie.
But is it does LA not have, does Los Angeles Zoo not have enough outback animals? Is
Yeah,
that-
yeah. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe they. I mean, the San Diego Zoo is supposed to be one of the best zoos in the world. So
yeah.
maybe
I
they,
do remember
maybe
a
they
cou-
thought,
'cause a couple-
let's go to San Diego. They know how to cage an animal.
Well, they do have quite. Wow, I didn't know you were so down on zoos. I like this side of you.
I'm just pandering to you, basically right
What?
now. I know you as an animal lover. I'm
Yeah.
just
No, you're right. But yeah, and they have an extensive Australian collection. I suppose that is the right word. At the San Diego Zoo. Do you remember a few years ago there was like some themed commercials for the zoo which were about Australian animals coming in contact with California culture?
no.
So it was like a koala with a jar of it was a jar. It's supposed to look like a weed He got it from a weed dispensary, but it was actually eucalyptus leaves, and he was in a lowrider,
Oh no, man.
and it was called like koalification or something.
All right then.
Koala fornication.
Koala fornication. All right.
And I remember them being like, I was thinking, wow, that's a little bit on the nose, but I guess weed is legal, and you know,
Fantastic.
goes back to the Hank from Breaking Bad's comment about
Right.
lowriders. It's a car that goes up and down. People used to be conquistadors.
Good stuff.
That's it.
Is that it?
That's my credit check. I'm amazed I managed to get so much out of it as that, because the credits are about 20 seconds.
Right.
I guess with animation, you got to leave some time for the credits, because
I always have confidence in
a
you.
lot more people work on animated films.
Yeah, that's true. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we were pleasantly surprised. You're going to have to tell us what you think about The Rescuers Down Under, not to mention the rest of the 1990 single sequels, all 8 of them, I guess. You're going to have to find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Send us an email to everythingsequel@gmail.com. When you hear us next, we're going to wrap up this nonsense. We're going to talk good, bad. We're going to rank. We're going to re-rank. We're inverting.